Hello Magic players, this is Jumbo Commander and I'm proud to bring you another deck tech. Today we have partner commanders Ikra Shidiqi the Usurper and Sidar Kondo of Jamura. These two awesome commanders partner together to make an excellent deck. Ikra Shidiqi the Usurper is 3 black-green for a 3/7 menacing Naga wizard, and whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, you gain life equal to that creature's toughness. And Ikra Shidiqi partners very well with Sidar Kondo of Jamura. 2 green-white for a 2/5 human knight with flanking. Oh my gosh, they brought flanking back. What a keyword. It doesn't really matter very much, but it gives you a little bit of an advantage when in combat. But creatures your opponents control without flying or reach can't block creatures power 2 or less. This makes Sidar Kondo very hard to block, and many other creatures in this deck very difficult to block. Ikra Shidiqi is also hard to block because of menace. I see we have a theme going on here. We also have a very high toughness theme as well. Ikra Shidiqi is going to let you gain life based on the toughness of creatures that connect. And Sidar Kondo definitely is a 2/5. So we can see these two commanders partnering together extremely well, giving us a great Abzan Asses deck. Now I had this deck tech all saved up, ready to go, but then something happened. Dusk Dawn was spoiled, was leaked, is a mistake, doesn't even exist, I don't know, but it is here and I want to go over it because it is perfect. Dusk is a 2 white sorcery that's a little bit of a board wipe. Destroy all creatures with power greater or equal to 3. Okay, we have a lot of creatures that are going to have high toughness and low power. So Dusk could be a little bit of a one-sided board wipe. Let's keep going with Dawn. Dawn has Aftermath. Cast this spell only from your graveyard, then exile it. Return all creature cards with power less than or equal to 2 from your graveyard to your hand. This will recur tons and tons of creatures from your graveyard to your hand, but I haven't even covered any of those creatures yet. Just remember Dusk Dawn as we're going through some of these creatures. It's going to fit perfectly in this deck. I really hope there are some shenanigans dealing with creatures power 2 or less in Amonkhet. I'm super excited. But let's go into some of the Toughness Matters theme. We've seen this before in Abzan, specifically in Doran the Siege Tower decks. Now, Doran the Siege Tower is very powerful, and he's going to be in this deck, along with another awesome enchantment called Assault Formation. Both of these will make the toughness of our creatures matter tremendously, and we're going to want to get these cards out and onto the battlefield. That's why we might employ a few tutors, maybe, to get them out on the battlefield. But if we take this in combination with Ikra Shidiqi the Usurper and Sidar Kondo, we can see that they become real big powerhouses in this deck. Now you might ask yourself, well then why isn't this a Doran the Siege Tower deck? And let me explain that to you because it's a real critical difference. Doran the Siege Tower is awesome, but he is very much an aggro commander. I know he doesn't look like it, but he is. He's a 5/5 for 3, and your whole deck requires having him out, or else you have like 1/6s on the battlefield and they don't do anything. So when I built a Doran deck, it was super fun, but it was all aggro, it was all attacking, and it was all about getting Doran onto the battlefield and swinging. And I didn't like that. So this is more of a controlling, interesting deck where toughness matters, and we're going to have those synergies come together to hit our opponents and get some value out of every single attack phase. So if we're getting value out of attacking, we could be attacking with some of our walls. Wakestone Gargoyle and Rolling Stones let our walls attack. But we haven't even talked about walls yet. Let's talk about the critical walls that we need in this deck. Sylvan Caryatid, Axebane Guardian, and Overgrown Battlements are incredibly important. If you're going to have sort of a wall matters deck or a little bit of a synergy in here, you're going to need to have these cards. We need mana ramp anyways, and we might as well have the intense mana ramp that comes together with walls. I love it. Going back to that assault formation lets you know that we might really need some of it. But again, remember the Dusk Dawn? That hits none of these and gets them all back from the graveyard in case something bad happens. Oh man. Let's keep going with these walls as we talk about Wall of Blossoms and Wall of Omens. These are great walls because they just come onto the battlefield and immediately replace themselves. And as long as we're talking about Toughness Matters, how about Abzan Beastmaster to draw some more cards? Very nice. Keeping on with the Defender theme, we could go pretty deep with Tree of Perdition and Tree of Redemption. These could attack as 13/13s. That's incredibly powerful. You know, if we want to go all in on the Toughness Matters strategy, we could use some very traditional Doran cards, and I wouldn't want to leave them out. It's Indomitable Ancients, Slagworm Armor, and Tower Defense. All of these are all stars in the Doran deck, and if you wanted to sort of lean Doran, go with those big 0/13s, find reliable ways to get Doran out or the Salt Formation out, and go with these huge creatures. I mean, Indomitable Ancients is a 4-mana 10/10. I mean, Slagworm Armor equips to give your creatures +6/+6. I mean, these cards are insane, but they go so well with the Doran deck. I don't have them in my partner deck, but I felt like I should mention them to you because if you want to go a little bit more aggro, bam, these cards could fit in very well. But if I didn't go all in on the Toughness Matters, where did I go? Well, I went a little bit more life gain, and that is mainly because of Ikra Shidiqi the Usurper. That will gain you a ton of life every time you connect with your opponents. That's why I've included Rock's Faithmender to double up your life gain. Not to mention Rock's Faithmender's a 1/5. Oh, geez. Him attacking will gain you 10 life. That's great. Actually, no, he'll gain you more life because he has lifelink himself. Oh my gosh, it's great. Saproling of Kolthanor is also very strong because it gives you card draw. And not to mention this power and toughness, 2/5, indestructible, life gain card draw, that's exactly what we're looking for. And you know, with all this life gain, we might as well weaponize it with Aether Flux Reservoir. Taking people out with that is one of my new favorite things to do. Besides drawing cards, which we can do with Well of Lost Dreams. You know, a little bit of incidental life gain can be nice, so throw a Courser of Krufix in there so that we can get a little bit of mana advantage and a little bit of life gain. Speaking of life gain, with Ailey Eternal Pilgrim, we can start nuking things with our life. And by the way, all of these cards have great power toughness ratios, especially considering Silklash Spider. It will only destroy flying creatures. But wait a second. Sidar Kondo says that creatures with flying can block your creatures. Interesting. Silklash Spider destroys them. Let's keep going with some extort mechanic. Pontiff of Blight, a 2/7. Wonderful, and causes everything to extort, gaining you tons of life and draining the battlefield. Not to mention Blind Obedience. It's a classic and one of my favorite cards to include. It gives you some tempo, especially because you're going to be wanting to attack, and giving you a little bit of life gain and drain. Wonderful card. You know, with all this life gain, we might as well throw in Sanguine Bond and Exquisite Blood. I'm just saying, you can throw it in there if you want to. I don't have it in my deck, but gosh, these cards are so good. Life gain is not a very good strategy, and this card combo makes it super good. I don't know. But if we want to keep going with the life gain combos, Felidar Sovereign and Test of Endurance will round out the ability to win through life gain. But I want to really control the board, so let's move on to a different category called Power is a Liability. This is where I punish you guys for having better creatures than mine. So Retribution of the Meek will bury all creatures with power 4 or greater. That's none of my creatures. Actually, it's just a few. Elspeth's Unchampion does a great imitation of that, and Wave of Reckoning will kill all your creatures, a lot of them, but I don't think any of mine. It's so good. And then remember, Dusk goes perfectly in this category. It's a board wipe that does hit some of our 3-power creatures, but overall just destroys everyone else. I love it. We're also going to punish you with Meekstone. Your creatures aren't going to be able to untap. Crackdown, a really weird card, not anywhere close to as powerful as Meekstone, but Crackdown says non-white creatures with power 3 or greater don't untap during their controller's untap steps. It still shuts down the board. And Ensnaring Bridge makes it impossible for your opponents to attack because you're going to be playing a bunch of cards. Now, we've punished them for power, but I want to talk about some of the synergies that we have in this deck when we're dealing with creatures power 2 or less. One of the strongest power 2 or less synergies that we have in this deck is Sidar Kondo of Jamora's awesome evasion that he grants to creatures with power 2 or less. Now, this evasion isn't wholesale. Creatures with flying or reach can block them, but we can utilize a lot of this power 2 or less synergy. Sidar Kondo's evasion also works for your opponents, which does give him a little bit of an interesting political angle. But I've got to say, one of the best ones is Revelark. Revelark can get us value from our graveyard and put it right back onto the battlefield. I know that it's 4 power and 3 toughness doesn't exactly match with many of the other creatures in this list, but Revelark is very powerful, and it does remind me of Dusk a little bit. It gives me hopes for Amonkhet. Moving on, Blinding Angel doesn't need the evasion granted by our commander, but has an excellent power and toughness ratio and an awesome ability when she makes contact. Whenever it deals combat damage to a player, that player skips his or her next combat phase. Blinding Angel can lock a person out of their attack phase. But my favorite card that synergizes with Sidar Kondo is the Snake Elemental himself, Spawnwrithe. Spawnwrithe is 2 and a green for a 2/2 trampling elemental that says, whenever he deals combat damage to a player, put a token that's a copy of Spawnwrithe onto the battlefield. This guy doubles up over and over and over again and comes down on 3. Sidar Kondo comes down on 4, making him impossible to block. And bam, you have an army of snaky snake elementals attacking your opponents, getting out of control. I love this guy. Moving on, we have some ninjutsu cards that can work very well. If you have creatures that are unblockable, you can ninja others in. Throat Slitter is a great example. Of course, Hypnotic Spectre also has a great ability when it makes contact with your opponent. And Woebearer has a nice power and toughness, but also lets you return a creature card from your graveyard to your hand. I like that. Not quite as strong a recursion ability as Revelark is, but still valuable. Orin Viper has an excellent effect because drawing cards is one of the best feelings around, and this power and toughness ratio is great. You know, as long as we're making contact with our opponents over and over again, Mask of Memory gets us a lot of value. In fact, many equipments get value when you make contact with your opponent. The swords come to mind, but the power and toughness boost, specifically the power boost, make it so that now they're hard to connect. Sidar Kondo doesn't easily get them through. Mask of Memory, though, is a great way to gain card advantage. Another way to gain card advantage is through Mentor of the Meek. All of our creatures are going to have power 2 or less when they enter the battlefield, and we're just going to keep drawing cards off of them. Timna the Weaver will get us a lot of value because we're going to be able to attack a lot of our opponents with the evasive threats that we have, and Timna will let us change in life for cards. That was an effect we wanted anyways. The card draw in this deck is great. Just tons of value everywhere. But we're going to have to do some damage to our opponents, especially if we keep swinging in with 2 power creatures. It's going to be a long road. That's why cards like Raving Dead that can just cut a player's life in half are excellent. And Raving Dead does have a downside, put that in quotes, because you have to pick your opponent at random. With the evasion that Sidar Kondo gives, Raving Dead can just destroy our opponents and we don't care who it's going to be. If we want a little bit more discretion about who we attack, Quietus Spike does the same kind of damage that Raving Dead does, but it can go on any of our evasive threats. Not quite as powerful as Raving Dead or Quietus Spike, Graveblade Marauder comes in and does a little bit of a sad imitation. Your player loses life equal to the number of creature cards in your graveyard. That might not be very many. That's why I prefer Guilt Feeder. Not only is it a horrifying alien thing that's taking control of you, but also, if it attacks and isn't blocked, defending player loses 1 life for each card in his or her graveyard. This can be a very meta-dependent card. I know games where Guilt Feeder would just deal like 30 immediately because they just take advantage of their graveyard, and now you have a card that can punish people in your playgroup. Another valuable creature is Centaur Rootcaster. When he connects with an opponent, you get a land straight onto the battlefield. It kind of reminds me of Sword of the Animist. Sword of the Animist does pump power and toughness, just like those other swords I mentioned. Now, it doesn't mean that you can't find these equipments a home in this deck, but when you start pumping power, your creatures aren't as evasive anymore. It's disappointing. There are enough equipments in here that you might want to consider running a Stoneforge Mystic. I don't know, maybe going a little bit of equipment synergies here and there. One thing that I did notice is that this is not a very artifact-heavy deck, especially if you don't go all in on the equipment. We don't run the traditional signets or artifact mana because we're running walls and creatures to produce our mana ramp. That's why a card like Bane of Progress can be very valuable. And this is a late inclusion. I didn't have it in the beginning because Bane of Progress gets huge and then dies to our board wipes and doesn't synergize very well. But it actually synergizes a little bit better because Bane of Progress is a 2/2. Haha. That means that in your graveyard it can be brought back with Revelark or with Dawn Dusk or with some of these other synergies that we have. Now, I mentioned this deck can be a little bit weak to artifacts and enchantments, so I've also included Vraska the Unseen. Now, Vraska the Unseen is definitely not as powerful as, say, Putrefy, but Vraska has one other ability that is very, very nice, and that is, oh please, let's ultimate Vraska, put in assassin creatures that win the game when they connect with your opponents, and then Sidar Kondo someone to death. That is what I want to accomplish. It's a really great feeling, guys. So I might include Vraska just to see if I can live that dream. Now let's talk about something near and dear to my heart, card draw. I want to talk about a little bit of card draw that might tax your life a little bit because you're going to have tons of life to play with. Sylvan Library will regularly draw you 3 cards because paying 8 life is nothing to this deck. And Phyrexian Arena, having the reliability of card advantage is just going to be great. But I want to focus on a different strategy that can generate some card draw in this deck, and that's the Monarch mechanic. Championed by Protector of the Crown, a 2/5. When it enters the battlefield, you become the Monarch, and that means you're susceptible to assassination. Now, it means you get to draw a card at the end of your turn. And as long as you hold the Monarchy, you get to keep drawing those cards. And by the way, you hold the Monarchy by preventing people from attacking you. Oh, I wonder if a lot of defensive creatures with high toughness will prevent people from attacking you. Yes, it will. And by the way, if they actually take the Monarchy from you, I wonder what gets the Monarchy back better than having creatures that are very difficult to block. It all comes together, and Protector of the Crown is my pride and joy, because it also redirects all damage that will be dealt to you to it instead. I've also got to say that Throne of the High City is a great inclusion in a lot of decks. I've really loved it, especially in my mono brown decks, because it just can generate you some card advantages. It throws the Monarchy into the mix. Now, I have to say, if you're including Monarchy cards, some of the best ones don't really fit this theme. I know, it's a little bit sad, but Regal Behemoth, a favorite of mine, has power and toughness 2 great. Same with Knights of the Black Rose. Custody Lich, Palace Jailer just barely makes it through. I think I'm going to end up playing Palace Sentinels and Thorn of the Black Rose just because of the power and toughness synergy involved. And actually, I'm not that disappointed in them. Playing a 1/3 Death Touch that draws you a card for 4? I'm okay with that, I think. I'm going to have to see how they play, but I'm really, really intrigued about this Monarchy mechanic and how it works in this deck. That has been my Ikra, Shidiqi the Usurper, and Sidar Kondo of Jamura deck tech, combining these 2 guys together for a lot of big toughness, abzan, evasion, awesomeness. I love the synergies with all of these cards. The Toughness Matters, the evasion that we get, the one-sided board wipes, especially the new one-sided board wipe out of Amonkhet. I'm so excited. I'm really hoping, guys, that there's some new cards that fit into this archetype, and if they are, I'm just gonna geek out about them on the channel, and I hope you'll follow along. But I have to say, I've built this deck, I play it a bit, and it's really fun. It's not a traditional aggro deck. It's not a traditional control deck. It's kind of a weird mid-range, does its thing really well, is resilient at the table. If you are interested in sort of a powerful mid-range deck, this has got to be for you because it's super fun to play. I've thrown in a bunch of my favorite cards in some of these synergies, and sometimes when they line up, you're unstoppable. I think it's a really great deck, and I really hope that you guys enjoyed following along as I described it in probably way too much detail. I want to thank you all for watching. My name is Jumbo Commander, and I make deck techs and commander videos. And if you like deck techs, commander videos, all sorts of stuff like that, come back next Wednesday where I will have more. Thanks so much for watching, guys, and I'll see you later. Bye.